Good Wednesday morning, everyone. It is 10 o'clock, which means it's my favorite time of week, the time I know I'm going to spend time with all of you here at any given point of the week. My name is Randy Lober, Growth Marketing Manager here at Action Benefits, and part of my job is to help you all grow your books of business. And one key part of that is knowing like the state of the landscape around you, what's going on in the market, what rules are changing, what funding sources are changing that's going to impact how you do business and how your beneficiaries uh, live with, interact with, breathe with Medicare going forward. And that's where we'll spend a good portion of our time today. Joining me today is my partner in crime, Chelsea Gomez, our learning and development specialist. Chelsea, say hi to the people, please.
So far, no crimes have been committed in the making of this webinar, but we are only 1 minute in, so buckle up. Thank you all for joining us today as we talk about how like Randy said, how we can plan for next year for your clients when it comes to Part D. And then my other personally fascinating subject to me, GLP-1s and how the government is going to try to get those covered in some way to some of your clients. Hey, Dave.
Morning, Miss
Hey.
Sheila.
Welcome to the show, everyone. If you have questions, please put them into the chat. You know that you hear me say it every time at the beginning and the end of every webinar. My favorite time of week, my favorite time of the favorite day of the week. So put any questions you have in the chat so I can answer them. And Randy, take it away.
I will. Well, here we go. By the way, so today's session, Part D updates in GLP-1 Bridge, which is the GLP-1 coverage Chelsea was alluding to earlier. By the way, that's the Gordie Howe Bridge opening today for the first time to pedestrian traffic. So if you want to ride your bike or walk over to Canada from Detroit, you are welcome to today. Open at 8 o'clock. So maybe go take a journey here later today. We'll tell you a bit about some market updates here, but it doesn't do you any good if you can't explain how and why that Part D benefit is changing to your clients. So we'll give you some of the tools to do that because someone's going to ask, wait a minute, I thought my Part D max was capped at $2,000. And that's not the case. And we'll tell you why. We'll also help you explain the GLP-1 Bridge program and how it might impact your clients' drug costs. This is a new wrinkle introduced that went into effect in July 1st, and it's gives Medicare beneficiaries the opportunity to access GLP-1s like Wegovy, Ozempic, and so on and so forth, but not as part of their Part D benefit. And that's the part where it gets confusing and where some education from your part could go a long way toward helping your clients understand the options ahead of them. So let's talk about those things in order. We'll tackle Part D cost sharing increases first. And to really understand the present and indeed the future, it's always nice to take a look back at the past. So if you've been attending any of our webinars for a while, and by the way, if you're new here, welcome along. But if you've been attending webinars for a while, you know that we are big proponents and big followers of KFF, the Kaiser Family Foundation, who is really kind of health insurance watchdog. They take watchdog, not watchdog. We don't watch dogs here. Um, they took the cost sharing model for catastrophic coverage, the coverage gap, initial coverage, and deductibles, laid them side by side for 2023, 2024, and 2025. Going back in time, 2023 was the last year the Medicare Part D benefit looked like it did when it was instituted in 2006. In 2024, that catastrophic that Inflation Reduction Act started being phased in, and you saw a catastrophic coverage change over time, where Part D enrollees and outlined in orange no longer had to cover any expenses after they hit that $8,000 cap. At least $8,000 was that year. And in 2025, you saw full implementation of the Inflation Reduction Act, which means that beneficiary in 2025 at least did not have any out-of-pocket obligations in that catastrophic phase. And in fact, Part D plans now bear 60% of the cost, with drug manufacturers and Medicare each respectively bearing 20% of the cost. So a few things happened with the Inflation Reduction Act, just to set the stage here, is the beneficiary responsibility for paying for Part D drugs slowly went away over those 3 years. But carriers ended up picking up a lot more of the responsibility when coverage did get into the catastrophic phase, going from 15 up to 20, and now having to cover 60% of the costs whenever a beneficiary reaches that catastrophic drug phase. So whenever they exceed their yearly out-of-pocket maximum on Part D. As you might imagine, that does have an impact on what benefits carriers offer and what prices they're willing and able to charge. But it's important to set this background, and it's also important to remember that the Part D cost sharing has changed over time. No need to memorize any of the figures on this chart. There won't be a test. The important thing to memorize though is, or see though, is that there have been increases over time. So from 25 up by $40, by 45, by 25, and now in 2027, the Part D deductible is increasing by $85 to $700 this year. Remember that initial coverage limit disappeared in 2024, or disappeared after 2024, so that figure doesn't come in anymore. But that out-of-pocket threshold has changed over time as well, right? In 2022, just to give you one more year of context, we've got 7,050. They added 350 and 600, got up to that $8,000 catastrophic limit that folks were hitting in 2024. And then the IRA helped to reset that down to $2,000, down to $2,100. And in 2027, their out-of-pocket maximum will be $2,400. And we'll see here that those increases in 2026 and 2027 are due to a statutory formula. So even though the IRA went into effect, the Inflation Reduction Effect went into effect, and that $0 cost sharing catastrophic phase began here, we saw the shift to the three-phase cost sharing model here. Everything we see here is written in law to increase by a certain figure, which we'll share here in just a moment, through 2029. And that figure that we mentioned is the API, or the annual percentage increase. And what that does is it measures changes in per capita, per head, per person, Part D spending. And the API takes into account two different but related measures. First, CMS takes a look at projected Part D costs per beneficiary for the coming year and figures that into the annual percentage increase. But they also take a look at the previous year's Part D claims and do a bit of a true-up adjustment to figure out, did we hit that to make up for any shortcomings or any overestimations that they made when they projected the growth rate. So to take a look at that, remember 2025, there wasn't a projected annual increase there because that was the first year of it. But after all 2025 Part D claims were filed, Part D costs per head went up about 8.5% or 8.6%, depending on which math teacher you're talking to, in 2025. CMS looked at that data and said, we don't think it'll be that bad going in the future. So in 2026, they projected it would increase 5.7%, but real claims experience came in a bit better than that, 4.27%. But for 2027, they are projecting a 9.37 API, and the claims experience that they're seeing after all the claims from 2026 is they missed the mark here. It was actually a 13% increase that they saw as a result of underestimating some of the spending growth due to more, an older, sicker population and the increase of GLP-1s being prescribed to Medicare beneficiaries. And so the short version is the reason why you are seeing this increase here is because CMS did not anticipate or did not fully appreciate how much and how fast GLPs would take on under Part D coverage for the things that can be covered for, in addition to all the specialty drugs and so on and so forth that we've been hearing about ad nauseum for the past few years. So take a look at the broader Part D market, so just beyond those few numbers, we should also talk about some other things driving the trends and what your beneficiaries could experience here this fall. And the first thing we want to pay attention to is the national average monthly bid amount. And that what that is a carrier's bid represents the amount of money, the number of dollars they think it would take on average to provide basic Part D coverage to each beneficiary throughout the nation. And they bid on a monthly cost. In 2023, before the Inflation Reduction Act went into effect, that national bid average monthly bid amount, so all carriers throughout every service area in the nation, predicted on average it would cost us about $34.71 to cover a Part D beneficiary. Here in 2027 or going into 2027, CMS just released this figure. That average carrier bid has grown 753%. Carriers now think it takes about $300 per month to provide basic Part D coverage to the average Medicare enrollee throughout the service areas around the country. So in other words, if you want to think about this as analogous to kind of an MLR, that what they expect they're going to be paying in claims, what they expect they're going to be paying in drug coverage has shot up 750% in the past 5 years. Although there is good news here to be found, this orange line represents the year-over-year change. So that there was an 85% change between 23 and 24, spiked up to almost an 180% change in 2025. But we've seen the rate of growth slow here down to 33 and then to 23%. And what this tells us is that carriers had to eat a lot of those Part D costs, right, as a result of the shifting in the Inflation Reduction Act in 2024 and onward. But now it seems that their bids are stabilizing a little bit. Their price expectations are stabilizing a little bit. And so, knock on all the wood I have close by, these increases should not be or may not be as high as we've seen here in the past. In fact, the market seems to be finding its level. The other key figure that we need to talk about is the National Beneficiary Base Premium, and you know this better as the premium or the figure that undergirds your beneficiaries' late enrollment penalties for Part D if they do happen to have one. What the National Base Beneficiary Premium is what carriers expect on average, and this is before subsidies, before LIS, before any of that other stuff gets into the mix. This is, or even regional or plan variations for that matter. This is what carriers expect on average that beneficiaries would have to pay for coverage in a Part D plan. Now you see here in blue what the actual figure is: 3274, 3470, and 24, up to 4133 up here in 2027. Now, what the inflation, or one of the things the Inflation Reduction Act did was it did cap the increase of that premium at 6% annually, meaning that LEPs can't go up more than 6% annually. Other figures related to the National Beneficiary Base Premium can't go up more than 6% annually. But what CMS is also obligated to report is what that figure would be without that 6% cap in place. And so we'd see that over time, that growth has been quite significant, right? Without that cap in place, without that price cap in place, the National Beneficiary Base Premium would be $94.06 coming into 2027, meaning that your Part D penalties would surely be increased for beneficiaries subject to them, but also Part D IRMA adjustments would also be increased because IRMA adjustments are also derived from the NBPP here. That's part of the calculation in the background. So what we're seeing, if we just want to take the last two slides in a nutshell, is that carriers are projecting their costs are increasing. They're saying that they would probably need more premium to cover their costs. But on the consumer side of things, the government has put that 6% cap in place so that premiums don't rise too much going forward here. There's also one more thing to take a look at here, and this slide is better illustrated by what we by a graph here before I go on to that. Starting with plan year 2025, CMS saw that these premiums were going to explode. And in 2025, they put in place a premium stabilization demonstration. In short, they wanted to incentivize carriers with some extra cash to not raise their premiums too much at a time. And so in exchange for not raising their average premium more than $10 per year, carriers got some extra subsidies from the government to really keep things in control. CMS also announced just a week ago or so now that demonstration will end beginning in contract year 2027. And what that actually means for what your beneficiaries pay, well, the estimates vary depending on the source you look at. The current administration estimates that on average, your beneficiaries will see about a $10 increase for their standalone PDP premiums. The demonstration only applied to standalone PDPs, not as part of MAPDs. Other sources like the Kaiser Family Foundation, who we cited earlier, thinks it'll probably be closer to a 20% per or $20 per beneficiary increase per month for that standalone Part D. Our guess, it's an educated guess, is it's probably somewhere in the middle, depending on the plan's current premium, how they structure their formulary, whether they make any formulary adjustments while still being legal. And of course, the demonstration only applied to standalone PDPs, so it's going to hit standalone PDPs harder than MAPDs. Your MAPD coverage, we think, will stay, at least formulary-wise, will stay relatively the same, but you're going to see more premium variability for sure when it comes to your standalone Part D. So if you work heavy in the Medicare submarket, you pair it with standalone Part Ds, your beneficiaries can probably expect somewhere between a $10 to $20 increase going into next year. There is a bright spot for all that gloom and doom we just shared, though, and that is the de minimis amount. De minimis amount is the amount of premium that plans may waive for folks who are LIS eligible. So in other words, your folks who receive LIS, the LIS subsidizes a certain amount of it, of the Part D premium. It generally brings you down to about within $2 of being zero. What the de minimis amount is that, again, that's that monthly premium amount that plans can waive if a beneficiary is subject to LIS. That has stayed constant, and all the calculations around it with LIS have stayed constant. So plans are opting in. They're saying, yeah, if a beneficiary's LIS doesn't quite get them all the way there, these last $2 on the bill, we're not going to charge them for that. And that is a voluntary thing. But plans do choose to participate in that going forward because they want as much business as they can take, at least going forward here as well. But you've heard Chelsea and I talk for about 20 minutes about the Part D market in general. Want to give you a chance to put it all together for your own brains. Let's take a look at this. And so we've seen that carrier bids have grown by about 753% in the past 5 years. The National Beneficiary Base Premium, so what carriers expect to charge for that, has grown by about 24% in the same period. What do you all see as some possible consequences? We'd love to see some thinking in the chat from you all before we reveal some of our thinking here as well. I'm going to take a sip of water, but also check in on what's happening on the chat going forward.
Keep in mind too that demonstration, the Part D demonstration could have gone on another year, based on what the Inflation Reduction Act had set into place. And the current administration just decided they didn't want to continue it for another year. They thought that the carriers had enough time at this point to stabilize based on what they had known about what was going to happen in the market for that time period with the changes that went on with Part D. But then GLP-1s kind of threw a wrench in that too, which is what we're going to get to momentarily here with the GLP-1 Bridge program, the government's response to how they can help carriers without having that demonstration in place, putting a different demonstration in place, the bridge demonstration. I didn't realize that the word demonstration was going to be so much in government and until I started doing this.
Yeah, we're demonstrating that we can or can't do things. But Christine, you're right. You may see more carriers leave the market. You're going to see some plan changes. There's a few things that we think for sure. If we were betting men and betting ladies, we here's what we would bet would happen going forward. We'd bet, first of all, that you're going to see more both standalone Part Ds and MAPDs featuring that maximum deductible of $700, right? They need to save some money somewhere if they're going to keep operating, and that means, unfortunately, that cost may be shifted on to beneficiaries at some point going forward. There are going to the top right. Um, there are not a ton of plans that still have copays at tier three, but for those that do, and those few hangers on, I would imagine we're going to see them shift to co-insurance on tier three, and you may even see co-insurance creep up into tier one and two tier two as well. Depending on the drug and plan design, as plans again try to make all the math work on the back end, right now that they're bearing some more of the cost of the plans here. We'd also expect that formularies would get leaner coming up, so keep an eye on those on January 1, particularly because typically formulary resets don't always align with when AEP starts. So certainly during MA OEP, we see that potentially being a busy time here as well. Um, but we say within the law, though, to remind us all that there are certain drug classes that every Part D plan has to cover. There's a certain number of drugs in every drug class that every Part D plan has to cover. So there'll still be options for folks, but I would expect that you'll see less brand names options covered in a favorable way for your clients going forward.
Where wiggling is available, wiggling will wiggle.
Yes. The other thing we'd expect is that loss ratios for sure are going to keep increasing. So what does that mean? It means carriers are still going to seek to cut both admin and distribution costs. And that's our nice way of saying that we expect, at least in standalone Part Ds, that commissions are probably going to stay where they're at. That is to say, I wouldn't look to them coming back if they've disappeared on the plan that you prefer next year, simply because the financials probably don't make it work. Would I be happily surprised if we did see more Part D plans paying? Absolutely. And I will be dancing on the rooftops with you if we see that happen. But just be prepared for that to be a possibility coming forward. Chelsea, I saw you unmute, and I know we wanted to talk more about the deductibles actually here.
Yeah, I had to actually reconcile with myself when we were making this slide because I'm like, oh, okay, more plans will have that $700 deductible. That's like not bad because honestly, not a lot of plans have that deductible. And then I went and looked. I was always under the impression my entire health insurance career that not many Plan D's had a deductible, and it looks like the figure is 82%. Um, most 82% had have currently in 2026 a deductible attached to it, where that's only 23% a couple years ago. So yes, I guess it was right when I first was getting into the market and understanding a few years ago that deductibles weren't a big thing. But they're all, Emily's agreeing with me. They're all adding these deductibles, man. And I'm not accustomed to this. And I don't think our clients are, I don't think our clients are either. I had to change my mindset around Part D plans after hearing that fact. I was just mind blown. I didn't realize that. So not only are there going to be more plans with deductibles, more of them are going to be hitting that maximum deductible of $700.
Yeah. And we're we're just messengers, right? But yeah, it's something to certainly be prepared of. But fear not, there's also good news on the horizon, and that's where we're going to spend the last 15-20 minutes of our time here together, and that's with the GLP-1 Bridge program. We should talk about what it is and what it isn't to really kind of cement this for those, especially because at the top of the hour, some folks said they might not have been as familiar with it. GLP-1 Bridge, in a nutshell, is a temporary, and I cannot emphasize that word temporary enough. It's a demonstration program that runs through the end of 2027. And what it does is it does allow beneficiaries to access specific GLP-1s for weight loss diagnoses through that time, and they can do so at a $50 copay. I'll get to which ones in just a moment. What's really important, essential, absolutely cannot forget is that this does exist outside Part D claims and coverage, meaning that you have to be a Medicare beneficiary to enroll in the program. But GLP-1 coverage for weight loss will exist outside Part D claims and coverage, which means any spending your clients do on this program toward a GLP-1 will not count toward their deductible, will not count toward their out-of-pocket maximum, will not count toward their troop, will not count toward anything Part D related. It's entirely separate from their Part D coverage. It sits outside of that, which is why I have that in bold for us there. And this is a small and temporary demonstration here because Medicare cannot legally cover weight loss drugs. So they're getting around it by kind of doing the demonstration. And that's the government's way of having a sort of a test bed for figuring out what this could look like should they make a permanent change later. It would take an act of Congress to make coverage for weight loss GLP-1s legal going forward. So what is covered going forward? Again, specific formulations of 3 drugs. Each of these formulations can be accessed at a $50 monthly copay. And that is Foundayo or Foundeo, the tablet version of that. Wegovy, both in injection and tablet version of that, and the Zepbound KwikPen, the KwikPen only, not pills or anything else, can all be acquired at $50 copays for $30 fill, regardless of their Part D benefit. So even if they've satisfied their Part D deductible on their plan, whether it's an MAPD or a PDP, even if they've satisfied their out-of-pocket maximum on their Part D plan or their Part D coverage, whether it's MAPD or PDP, they're still going to be paying that $50 copay per month if they're taking advantage of this program. Now, the folks that may qualify for this fall into 3 categories. Tier 1 eligibility is your clients who may have a BMI of 35 or plus, and they don't need any additional diagnosis to qualify for the demonstration should they fall into that category. If their BMI, which is that ratio of height to weight, rests between 30 and 34.9, they need to have at least one of the diagnoses pictured to your right: heart failure, uncontrolled hypertension, or chronic kidney disease, which is stage 3A or beyond that. Or if they have a BMI between 27 and 29.9, they must also have a diagnosis of prediabetes, prior heart attack, prior stroke, or symptomatic peripheral artery disease. We should note, though, that GLP-1s are designed to help for weight loss, right? So BMI, for the purpose of the program, is measured when the therapy begins. And just because your BMI falls below one of these thresholds during the demonstration doesn't mean you can no longer access it. The doctor simply attests their eligibility when prescribing the GLP-1 going forward. There are some folks who are not eligible for the program, even if they might have met the other criteria here. And that is anyone with a GLP-1 that is paid through their Part D plan in 2026. Now, you might say, Randy, you just told me that you need coverage for, to have GLP-1s approved. There are a few conditions where Medicare does approve GLP-1s for Part D coverage as part of your standard Part D benefit. So you can be prescribed a GLP-1 and have it covered under Part D for type 2 diabetes, for moderate to severe obstructive sleep apnea, or non-cirrhotic MASH, which is fatty liver plus with moderate to advanced liver fibrosis. So if they have a GLP-1 and have had it covered under their Part D plan for any of those 3 conditions, they cannot be eligible for the Bridge program. But fret too much. It's not as though you'll have to diagnose people. Your role here is pretty limited beyond education and making people aware. So you don't have to do anything to enroll beneficiaries. In fact, that's handled on the doctor's end. I'll show you that in a minute. All that happens is once the provider makes the diagnosis, they submit both the prior authorization and the prescription directly to CMS. And any questions about whether someone will qualify are best left between the beneficiary and their doctor. We share this information here today for you to simply be aware the program exists and for someone to, if someone were to ask you, what can I expect to pay for a GLP-1 or will it be covered for me? To give you some tools to help answer that question, but you certainly are not in the business of determining whether or not they're eligible for this demonstration. So what will your client's experience probably look like? Of course, they'd likely visit their doctor and discuss weight loss, and the doctor would evaluate, their any comorbidities along with their BMI against CMS's critical criteria there. If appropriate, then, as I said, the doctor would submit the prescription and prior auth to CMS for payment and distribution. Client would then go fill that prescription at the pharmacy and would pay their $50 copay every time they fill it. What will probably happen is your client will probably get confused by why it doesn't count toward your deductible or OPM, and you would probably like to gently remind them that you had this conversation or a conversation like this during AEP, where where we talk about how the Part D demonstration of this copay sits outside of your Part D benefit. But we should mention again that the GLP-1 Bridge is a temporary demonstration and scheduled to end on December 31st of 2027. So what happens in 2028? Well, CMS did create the Balance Program, which is a longer-term demonstration. They're kind of hedging their bets for this, knowing of all of the politics that goes around election years and so on and so forth. They kind of hedged their bets and looked forward and said, we think there's a way we can keep this covered for a bit longer. But that demonstration was suspended as of April of this year because not enough Part D plans volunteered to participate in that demonstration going forward. What we suspect is, and what CMS in fact said in their suspension announcement, is that they are probably looking at this initial demonstration here, the GLP-1 Bridge demonstration, to figure out a few things. Is it cost effective? And did it make a difference in Part D claims? Did it make a difference in beneficiaries' health going forward as well? That's one of the big questions about GLP-1s in general, right? Or what are the long-term effects? That's why you're seeing difficulty in employer plans covering them. It's why you're seeing difficulty in under 65 plans covering them, and certainly why you're seeing difficulty in other sources of coverage covering them. This demonstration is really kind of the first all-in moment, the first real proving ground to see what's it look like, what are the long-term effects, and carriers are very much seem to be taking a wait-and-see approach here as well. Should mention, though, that anytime between now and 2028 or even after 2028 is an active Congress could permanently codify coverage of GLP-1s for weight loss. But again, right now, Medicare coverage for GLP-1s specifically for weight loss is still not legal. So I talked a lot. Chelsea talked some too. I'll give her some credit there as well. If you had a client across the table from you tomorrow, what do you see some key points to remember when you're explaining the program to clients and prospects? We'd love to see a few notes from you all in the chat just to make sure we're all on the same page. And again, gives a chance to answer questions from and for you.
This is so fascinating to me. Like, it is so hard to just sit and be quiet when while you're presenting all this because I know so much about this. It's so interesting to me. Like, they figured a couple years ago, wasn't it in the billions, that if everybody who could be prescribed due to obesity a GLP-1 through Medicare there'd be like billions of dollars saved in theory. And I think that all parties involved understand that. So I think that they're trying to figure out, each party is like playing their, like, I don't know if you watch the show Succession, but playing like their Succession game of like, how can I get the most out of this situation? Medicare is trying to say, how can I save the most money long term for myself in this situation? manufacturers, speaking to some of the things that are being said in the chat, like drug manufacturers are probably are saying, I'm going to actually guarantee, because we live in a capitalist society, guarantee that's what they're saying. Like, hey, how can I make the most out of this? People people who are seeing this as a way to make themselves healthier are going to jump on this opportunity to take this medication, as they should. And whether or not that long term, um, whether or not you look at the data and see if it's a long term drug that needs to be taken long term or not, might affect the decisions that everyone's going to make here at this point. There are some studies that say you have to take it long term. There's some that don't. Like, so there's a whole bunch of things that are at play here, moving factors that are going to determine how this will play out, and everyone's got to make their individual choices to what works best for them.
Yeah, could not agree more, right? It's a bit of a poker game going on here, and this is kind of our first uh, toes into the water here. Um, I want to echo and bring up a point that Jessica brought up in the chat here. This is very much a temporary program, right? So if we get to 2028, right, and the carriers don't pick up on the balance model and Congress hasn't acted, that means a person taking the drug in December of 2027 and enjoying their $50 copay may not have that same $50 copay in January of 2028, right? Their costs may increase if the government takes no further action or plans don't take any further action, or all of this gets jumbled here, right? So it's certainly something to be conscious of going forward. Christine does bring up an interesting point about E&O and whether this discussion would be covered by E&O. Excellent consideration there going forward. So what's the big so what here? Your clients certainly will ask you, how much will my drugs cost next year, right? Especially if they have new drugs, they're adding a GLP-1, they're considering a GLP-1. But the answer, as always, is never clear cut. And with the introduction of the GLP-1 Bridge program, it's even less clear cut, right? Because the answer is going to depend on their Part D benefit, whether the drugs are subject to deductible, coinsurance, copay, or OOPMs as they move through that level, or even, whether they're taking advantage of that the spreading program that they can use to spread their drug payments around throughout the course of the year. But it's also going to impact whether or not they're taking a GLP-1 and it's a part of the bridge program, right? Because if so, then your out-of-pocket spending could be more than $2,400 next year, right? You could be paying additional monies for that bridge copay. But what's important to remember here is you guys as industry pros weren't maybe as quite aware of this program as you wanted to be when you walked in the doors here. I guarantee your clients are even less aware than you are when you walked in the door here today, right? It's not been well publicized, but certainly everyone is asking about GLP-1s and what they can do with that, and can I take it? So they're going to be looking to you for guidance, and that again is guidance within the law here, right? And within what your E&O will cover. You're certainly never recommending a GLP-1. You're always saying that conversation is between you and your doctor at a minimum. But you can help them estimate their costs based on what we see going forward here. So promised 45 minutes. We're here right about there. I want to thank you all for your time and attention here today. We're seeing lots of chatter in the chat here today, so we want to attend to some of that. But should you need to be on your merry ways this morning, you are always welcome to contact us on LinkedIn at the Action Benefits Company. You can get a hold of Chelsea and I at learning@actionbenefits.com, or find us at 248-356-8585.
Someone's asking on reclarification about non-eligibles. So let's be clear. There's no can you roller skate on the Gordie Howe Bridge? Don't get distracted, Chelsea. Answer the question you were originally trying to answer. So nobody is getting this who is not eligible. Let's be clear here. The doctor still needs to like prescribe this to someone. I think what you're meaning, Marty, is like not eligible through their regular Part D coverage, is probably what you're saying.
Right.
So they would have to be diagnosed with their doctor as Randy, could you go back to that slide with the BMIs on it and stuff? Do you remember which one that?
Well, so yes, but so there's two things at play here, right? If you fall into one of these categories as described here, so your BMI range 35, 30 to 34.9 or 27 to 29.9, plus the conditions listed on the right side, you're eligible for the GLP-1 Bridge program, and that's when you'd have the $50 copay.
And remember,
However, under the standard Part D benefit, if you have one of these conditions, the type 2 diabetes, moderate to obstructive sleep apnea, non-cirrhotic MASH, those would be covered on those GLP-1 indications would be covered under your standard Part D benefit. So whether you have that under an MAPD or a PDP, that would all count toward your deductibles, your maximum out of pockets, so on and so forth.
but this isn't changing. Like this, what's on the screen now, that was already a thing. You already could get these covered before the bridge program happened. Like this isn't new.
Right,
The bridge program part is new. Just this
right.
wasn't really talked about much because this is not usually, I wouldn't say not usually. There are lots of people who get them obviously prescribed for these reasons, but this isn't the one you'd like naturally think of when you think of getting prescribed a GLP-1. These were being prescribed for pre-diabetes way before we heard about them as a weight loss thing. These have been around for a long time. It's just not that they've been around for this purpose. So if I'm currently taking,
If you have so if you're part of Bridge, right, here's where you have the $50 copay if you're meeting these qualifications. Here it if you have one of these diagnoses, type 2 diabetes, moderate to severe apnea, or non-cirrhotic MASH, that's going to be subject to wherever the plan has placed the GLP-1 on their formulary. So however, if it's a tier 5 drug for them and that means X percentage co-insurance or copay, that's what they'd be paying there. So not the $50 copay in this case.
which might be beneficial if you want that contributing towards your cost contributors. Might be better to go the other way,